start again. It's a redskin.
Doing. This is Word on the Streets with my man Christian Flemming here. We have a special guest today, Mr. Aldridge, historian in my eyes, right? He's going to give us a lot of information. Before we got on the show, we were doing some going back in the day type of conversations, but we're just going to keep going from what we left off last week with Mr. Lee. Mr. Aldridge, thank you for coming on Word on the Streets.
Yeah, appreciate the invitation. Yeah, I really do.
I know Flemming reached out to you, and the reason we reached out to you, Mr. Lee, you type of men, because learn some of the history, what's going on. You know, we have what the times we're in right now, and you won't know what's going on now if you don't know your past, right? So
yeah, that's right.
That's what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
And we reached out to the men that we know, right? And everyone else should know that had a lot to do with what's going on here in Fresno, California, and learn some history about what's going on in the world. So tell us, how do you feel about the past of violence, not racial, racial violence, right?
Yeah.
Discrimination, and how does it tie into today?
Yeah, let me just say this, that during the 60s, when the Watch riots started and all of the trouble that was down there, the city of Fresno hired a human relations director that allegedly understood what was going on in the minority community, and I was fortunate enough to get that job. So I was the first human relations director for the city of Fresno.
Wow.
And it kind of went over to Ray Johnson. He was human relations, but they were not dealing, as far as I'm concerned, with the issues that we had when the Watch riots. And we had the summer programs and so forth going on then to talk about the long, hot summers back then. And they had the job programs and so forth. But then I can talk about what happened after that, but looking at it now, it's an interesting situation. I'm not pessimistic about it, but hopefully a lot more will be positive on what folks are doing now, because this is the third week of not picketing, but demonstrations. And hopefully that'll really make some substantive changes. So with regards to, the whole racism thing, that's been with us a long time.
Oh yeah.
I think, at least my definition, given my academic background and going out to Fresno State and teaching for
Right.
15 years out at Fresno State in the School of Social Work Education. When we talk about change and all the rest of that, we talk a lot about change, let's say white people and other races changing their attitude toward us. I think an easier way to get there is change your behavior.
Yeah.
Because when you talk about your attitude, I can't get in your head
No,
and talk about
right.
your attitude, but the things that would benefit the individual and let's say the African American community is a change in behavior.
Yes.
And behavior relates to visible action.
Correct.
You know what I mean? So I think we need, and that visible action, I believe, is with the right kind of programs, the right kind for employment, the right kind of programs for education, and so forth. Secondarily, and this is on a personal basis, I don't really care about, what's way down inside of you. Just, hey, make the action positive, because it takes a psychological thing to deal with your attitude, but give me some positive behavior and leave me alone.
Yeah.
There it is.
So that's what I believe.
Yeah.
And it was interesting back then, in order for making, and we had a Human Relations Commission, and I understand that the city of Fresno now is talking about establishing a human relations.
Just now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's coming. It's coming back.
Full
It goes
circle.
goes in a full circle, and that Oliver Baines,
Yeah, it's
I
called
think, is kind of leading that.
Police commission.
Yes, that kind of a commission
Yeah.
that relates to police community relations.
Correct.
And back in the '60s, I had the opportunity when I started the college teaching career, is as a human relations director. I went out to the college to give a talk, much like this, a talk on police community relations, and I guess I did okay because they asked me to come back and teach a course on police community relations. Right. But in terms of the situation now, I think it kind of remains to be seen. There, with the Martin Luther King, efforts and all of that, things have happened. But I think those are behavioral change rather than getting in your head and changing you. You know,
Yes.
and I think what we don't want to do is break it out into, I'm a Democrat, that's a Republican. No.
Identity
it's-
politics.
Yeah. No. If you are in an influential position,
Yes.
that can make a difference in terms of equity for African Americans and minorities, then do something positive.
There it is.
Yeah. So anyway,
No, that's
Mr.
very
Yeah.
interesting.
Mr. Fleming, he was kind of looking at me there. Like,
You see
I
him
want-
eyes going up
yeah.
and down the eyebrow.
Yeah. What are your comments? I don't want to be the
No.
only philosopher here.
No, I think you're spot on. I think behavior has a lot to do with a lot of things that are going on. I believe African American, Black, whatever you're gonna call yourself, has to do a lot with emotions. I think we're emotionally driven people. So when something like a George Floyd comes out and we see it and we know it's been happening for a long time, our emotions are at an all-time high, even when it doesn't get as much publicity that the George Floyd deal got. And now with all the movements that's coming forth, for me, I can't speak for anyone else, I just have to be able to maneuver through the rhetoric to see what I believe is going to be good. But going back to what you said, you can never fail with an educational piece.
Yeah.
Because as long as you're educating your people on what the plan is and how you're moving, and you're constantly educating them, then I think that's a plus. And it's less rhetoric and deceit you have to move through.
That's right.
Because you're educating them on what you're trying to establish.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of the emotions out if you sit back and you want to get educated on the movement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what I believe. How about you, Streets?
Yeah, I feel the same, and I don't want to sound controversial, but you know, we have in our nation leaders who want to be on a podium, and they keep saying the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm the action type of guy. I want to, you know, you got us there. What's the plan?
Yeah.
So that's what I want to know. What's the plan moving forward, right? And with a lot of cities, states, counties changing laws and this, that, and the other, I feel that sugarcoating it. And like you stated earlier, just treat me with respect, right?
And give you some action.
Give me some action.
Some,
you know,
some
what I'm saying?
positive action
Yeah.
that you can touch, feel, and smell.
Right. You don't have to put it on paper to respect
That's right.
me.
Yeah. That's right.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So, so in the difference between the riots in L.A. and the actions that was taken now, how long was the riots in the Watts riots? How long did that last about?
Well, I don't know. They went on for, you know, off and on, and things were happening, and we had a rough month in there.
Okay.
It was really a tough month of looting and rioting and that kind of thing. And then they came out with the Kerner report. Don't worry about that fancy stuff. But they came out with a Kerner report talking about, the same issues basically as they're talking about now. And you can buy that. There's a book.
Kerner report.
Yeah, the Kerner report. And they talked about what ought to happen. And as soon as they did a few things, and the tangible then was summer youth so that you could cool down the long hot summers and give youth employment. Then those programs, kind of came and went. And we still, are talking about unemployment among minority folks, no matter what the statistics say. I would like to say something about the rhetoric that's going on now, and it happened yesterday with President Trump.
Oh, say it.
And I'll refer to him as Trump. I don't like to say even the president.
Some people call him Agent Orange.
Yeah. So,
I'm just saying.
Remember, just one thing in looking at it is when you talk about the unemployment figures and all the rest of that, just remember that you're getting reporting out of that from one of his departments.
Correct.
And all you got to do is juggle the numbers.
Yeah.
And statistics, you move around any way you want to.
Absolutely.
So don't be,
impressed
impressed with that
Yeah.
because they juggle around. I'm not sure of this, but I believe the head of the labor department, or the one that does all the statistics in that department, is McConnell's wife.
Oh, there you go.
One of the
Yeah.
big guys' wives over there, and Trump, absolutely lies so much, that you can't believe it. So you can juggle those statistics.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
What I want to see is my friends and relatives in West Fresno come up with meaningful jobs.
Correct.
And when that happens, then you've done something. But to quote those numbers and it's up and down, that's nothing but just report stuff.
Yes.
To make it look good.
And every time I talk to my black conservatives or just my conservative friends, that is all their talking points are stats and numbers, and they have nothing else to talk about as far as substance. They just want to talk about stats. Exactly what you said, man. Who's taking the stats, and what is the purpose of them taking those stats for? when you look at the reality of it, when you look at some of those stats, but then when you go into those communities or you go into whatever they're researching and you look at hardcore data, some of those stats and that data does not match up.
Yeah, see, that's what I'm saying. Hey, when my friends and neighbors, former neighbors, and those relatives that I have in West Fresno have that job that they can support their family and do all the rest of the things that they desire to do, the quote-unquote American dream, then we're doing something. When they come out with the statistics were up, all you got to do is juggle them from over there.
Yes.
If I can tell you this so it won't be on a too biased basis, I remember the way back in the 60s, that's when I left from Human Relations and did the Model Cities program in West Fresno. And there was a report that came out from the Kennedy administration, and it had the unemployment rate, of which he promised would go down. I'll be darned, it went down. And I'm saying, we got at this and all that, and I said, no. I spent a lot of money out there at that college taking these classes, and I read something about some stuff like this. What they can do, as President Kennedy did, the folks that are in training, they're off of the unemployment rolls. They don't go to the employment office to sign up. That's where they find out.
That's where they find out.
And if you are in a training program, like the Comprehensive Employment Training Act program, or the Manpower Development Act in training, you're off of the unemployment rolls. So when you during that period of time that you're training, you're counted as employed. You're taken off, so the rate goes down. But in most of those cases, with a number of the programs, sorry to say, that there were no jobs for folks when they got out of the training.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Happens all the time.
And then sometimes you go from one training program to the other, you know, and all you got to do is keep the training programs going. And the statistics stay down for the unemployed.
And they're willing
the
to
other
pay
piece
for that.
of that too is when you talk about the unemployment drops, let's say for African Americans, they count that at what we call the unemployment office. It's the EDD, the Employment Development Office. What happens is that you get disappointed and disgusted going and asking, you know, for a job, and you don't show up. If you don't show up, they make the assumption in the statistics that you
got a job. Oh, no.
Because you don't show up
to
looking for a job. Oh, no, honestly. You know, that's the way that statistics game is played. So I want to see my friends and relatives, you know, in Fresno as an example, with that job that is, you know, meaningful and can do what they want to do like everybody else does. Okay, there it is. You know.
So I have a question for you. So I was in a debate with a couple people and nothing unusual. But so as a city manager, that's a very important role, and as city council members. So for Southwest Fresno, other than counting the 4, how are funds allocated to do the redevelopment? You know, I heard you mention earlier about, so when I look at Southwest Fresno, but then I hear the stories of all the booming businesses and the African American people that had businesses back in the day, and I wasn't here then, but it seemed like it was a pretty good community, better than what it is now when there were African American people in there. But how does the funds and money, how do you get things back to Southwest Fresno, or is that no longer a desirable place? I'm just asking the question.
Okay. People will say, well, gee, you're the human relations guy. That's good enough, isn't it? After that, after human relations, I said, this is not enough coming out and talk about problems and trying to change attitude. Mm-hmm. What we need to do for the folks in West Fresno, what we need to do is we need to put some programs behind this stuff. Mm-hmm. And so what we did was went to the mayor, who was Floyd Hyde and all that, and started working on some programmatic stuff. Not talking about change your attitude, please give me a job. Let's train some folks and let's do some model city stuff. Let's build some houses and all that. And I could go into, some projects and so forth that we'll build over, not housing projects, but a housing unit. So we shifted it over to a programmatic kind of a thing rather than a attitude changing thing. And so the philosophy was, and you got by with saying, we're talking about the have-nots, have and have-nots. These are the have-nots, we need some program. We developed the Model Cities program. As a matter of fact, the director at the HUD office, Housing and Urban Development at the national level, was a former mayor of City of Fresno called Floyd Hyde.
Oh, wow.
He became the director of Model Cities in Washington. He became in Washington, given the hearings and so forth that he had to go through, and a Caucasian friend of mine in the office, and me in human relations, we were writing programs and writing his speeches for him, and they liked him so well. And the person that he worked for was George Romney Sr.
Oh.
Romney from Utah.
Romney.
It was his father he worked for. And so anyway, they had the Model Cities program, 26 cities in the United States. It was a 5-year funded program. During that time, it was referred to as a new federalism. And new federalism came out of the Democratic Party, and they were funding federal programs for housing, for all, and the anti-poverty program, the economic development, and I'm sorry, the, EOC?
Yes.
EOC.
That's the poverty program. That comes from the federal government to do something about the poverty. And it was new federalism from the Democrats that funded activities like that. For example, West Fresno had the largest urban renewal project area in the country.
Wow.
It was the General Neighborhood Renewal Area. That's the thing that, I don't know, in West Fresno, where over by where we call Jericho, there is that big mound.
Yeah.
That's the
hill. That's the hill.
The
Oh, the hill. Okay.
That's the hill to you.
Okay.
That used to be a.
Thanks for bringing me up to date.
That used to be a dump, a
Yes,
city
it was.
dump.
Yes, it was.
Oh, the hill.
It wasn't a landfill. There's a difference between a dump that they had then, where you burn the trash.
Right.
They just dumped it.
They dumped it in there and they burned it. Then the Environmental Protection Agency came out with, you got to do landfills. And that means that you take the garbage out there and then you got to put layers of dirt over it, and you don't burn. You don't burn anymore. I used to live downwind from the dump.
So you used to get all the dump.
Yeah. And so, but what is that called right now? If you went out there, the hill?
Yeah.
That's Hyde Park.
That's Hyde Park.
Hyde
yeah.
Park.
Right.
Yeah.
Floyd Hyde, the mayor of City of Fresno, they named it.
They named it
this
the
hill.
dump
the
after
garbage
him.
after him.
That's right. That's one of the big facilities that they had. And then right across the street from Hyde Park is the controversial debate over the slaughterhouses and the smell that they have there. That's been led for the last 15,
Forever.
20 years. no, more than 20 years,
Yeah.
by Miss Mary Curry.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
You know, to get rid of that stench and the smell and
Yeah.
all of that.
We got that on Walnut.
That's right. Yeah. And it was, you know, they would dump the open sewage and all the rest of it out there overnight, and those carcasses and all that from the deal. And they still have a smell,
Still
and they're
does.
still trying to buy it out, right?
Still trying to buy it out.
You see, so that's a health problem,
Oh,
you
major.
know, and a really deterrent. And they're still talking about how you get the money. Now,
How you get the money?
back to your question. There is not the federal government funding local governments for problem solving. It's not that those programs have gone. Even to the point when President Ronald Reagan did the, you know, he was the governor of California at the time. He cut out the Fair Employment Practices Commission. I don't know whether you know Ron McNair, but Ronnie
Sounds
McNair,
familiar.
he was a fraternity brother. Now, you know, don't worry about the name.
Okay.
But he worked for the city of Fresno and Model City, and then he went over to the FEPC, Fair Employment Practices deal, and they would do investigation of for affirmative action and discrimination, all that.
Yes.
And Ronald Reagan shut those places down. So, you know, so it's programmatic things that the federal government had back in the new federalism in the 60s that did a lot of things for West Fresno. Now, I will say this, and you said, gee, Jim, you know, you're guilty and all that. And I know a lot about it. We were trying to do something, but with the big redevelopment stuff and redevelopment downtown, putting the mall and all that, that's redevelopment. When you got out to the residential part, in there where the post office is and all that, that all used to be residential and churches and all that in there.
Wow.
But nationwide, after about 2 years of that kind of large activity of redevelopment, they call it Negro removal nationwide.
Wow.
Negro removal.
Remove.
Yeah, rather
Let's answer
than-
your question.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, because they say we'll take out the slums, we'll take out the slums and put in better housing and all the rest of that. But that big industrial area in there where Fresno B is,
Yes.
the Fresno B, and that the post office,
office.
and where the school district has that training place in
Yeah,
it,
across the
that all
street.
used to be residential and churches and small businesses and barbershops and stuff. Now, the African American community is what scattered.
Yes.
It is no longer a ghetto. It's no longer a ghetto. And when you talk about the African American community, that is more of a community of interest. We have, you live over here, I live over there, I might not in West Fresno, but we still have an interest in like
Right.
the things we're
Here.
talking about here, about education, we want better housing, we want that. That's community of interest. It used to be for the people in Fresno, African American community, used to be a geographical community. When you find us all in West Fresno.
Yeah.
But when you talk about Section 8 housing and that kind of stuff and scattering it and integration and all that, and you are a recipient of this service. That when I was human relations director, they also hired a human relations director for the school district because they were talking about Brown versus Topeka, that
yes.
deal. And so talk about integration. Well, working with the guy over there, we got bus tokens and so forth for the city of Fresno so those kids could go from West Fresno up there.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then we got so progressive, I wasn't a part of this one, got so progressive that they said, now you know where Irwin Junior High?
Oh yeah. That's Computech to you.
Yeah, yeah, that's right, yeah. And before Irwin, there used to be Edison Junior High.
Junior high. Right.
Edison Junior.
Oh,
It was
really?
Edison Junior High. And better minds than me in the education deal said, we don't need the junior high school, we'll take all of those middle school kids and send them across town. We don't need a middle school here. We'll send them across town. That's how you got the pyramids and the open enrollment going up there. And 40 years later is when they brought back Gaston.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it went in a circle. You know, it's interesting.
Very.
I'm old enough, folks. I'm 81 years old, so I've been around a long time as a Fresno. That education thing went in a circle.
It sure did.
Wow.
That's when they brought back the junior high school over here. And the geographics in West Fresno have changed, you know, but from more of the barrio now than the ghetto, but we're scattered, and Section 8 housing scattered that. So that's the situation in West Fresno, is when the federal programs came in there to really try to do something, there was an adverse effect of that. We did, you know, there were some things that we, you know, wound up getting, and as a human relation guy, I wound up, you know, down marching in Cesar Chavez deal down in Delano and the grapes and all the rest of that, because you know, that's what you had to try to do. And I'll say one more thing, and I know you guys got a couple of other questions you want to ask me, probably. That when Ronald Reagan was the governor, that they came to town and they wanted to talk to the Mexican American and the Mexican community in one meeting on the same day, and the African American folks in the next day. And I got along with my Hispanic friend, and I said, no, we're not going to do this separately, because you're going to divide, Reagan, you're going to divide and conquer, talking about we're going to do something for you folks, you know, state of California. Almost like we're in this phase right now of we're going to do something. I said, well, if you do something in Fresno, we're going to do it together, because we're all in the same boat, Hispanic folks, as well as African Americans. We're going to do it together. And they said, well, no, we want to do it this way. And I led a walkout, and when I walked out, guys were clicking cameras on me, and I said, okay, I'm in the FBI files. I'm in the FBI
no
files.
doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt.
But anyway, it related to in the 60s, programs called the New Federalism, where they funded local governments. They cut that out. Now, I do want to tell you that, like the economic opportunities deal we got in Fresno with Joe Williams' ingenuity and all of the late Joe Williams, that remains. It's functioning.
Oh.
It's still functioning, but not to the extent that it did in the 60s. A lot of the other programs were cut out. But I will tell you this, that those programs that were good in the 60s that did help a little bit, they're all still on the books.
Wow.
You know what you have? You have an authorization appropriation gap. They're still on the books. All you need is appropriations of money to those programs, and you're back up and going. Like Head Start program.
Yeah. Yes.
That stayed on the books, and they appropriated money for it.
Man.
They just did not appropriate the other. They don't do appropriation. I tell you what you do: get on the Google and look up at the Economic Opportunities Act of 1964. And then you'll see all the profile of those things. They just didn't allocate money for it.
Wow, that's interesting.
Okay.
There it is.
Yeah, that's real interesting. That's
and it's interesting to me in terms of history.
Yes.
And our deal from in Fresno is the cycle, and that cycle relating to education, that got gassed and back over there because we didn't have no junior high
Had
school.
no junior high.
And then they said, we're going to integrate. And what do? The 13 buses now, as you well know, come from up north, taking students down to Edison High School, Computech, because that's one of the highest rated schools ever. Now, go look at the, I hope I'm not preaching too much.
No.
Go look at the athletic situation. This is not a joke, folks, but they play lacrosse,
Water
polo. That's for those students that came over there.
Correct.
They got the best deal. So now you say it's integrated, at Computech, but the local folk, Hispanic, Hmong, or Southeast Asian folks, African Americans, by and large, they're not in those
Organization.
or those big classes and all the rest of it. You know what I mean? So anyway,
Oh, you're absolutely right.
you got to watch it. You got to watch it. Things go in cycles, and you got to, as they start to cycle, you got to make sure things happen, rather than one of these days.
Right.
Yeah. No, you have.
I'm talking about yeah. All right. So it goes in cycle. 40 years later, a junior high comes back to West Fresno, and all the other times it's been Computech up there, with occupied by folks from up north.
Yeah.
And they call it integration.
Yep.
And then Edison started winning academic decathlons, right?
Yep.
That wasn't no Edison. That wasn't no West Fresno residents.
And they started winning water polo championships.
I know, brother. But those were
Water polo.
Those were water polos.
Yes,
those were water
that's my
polos up
point.
there from
That's
up
my
north.
point.
Right.
That's my point.
Where I live,
That's my point. So,
By the way, folks, I don't live in West Fresno. I got married to a school principal and we had to go to what we thought was a better neighborhood, and pay a lot more for houses and all that. So we moved out. We didn't go to Clovis, but we moved out. But I got friends and relatives in West Fresno, and as you well know, it was just 3 years ago. I was out there in Hinton Center volunteering my time. So anyway, my heart's in West Fresno.
Heart.
Okay, go ahead.
Definitely.
Next question. It was the federal government during New Federalism in the 60s.
Well, I learned a lot, because if those things are available and they just need allocated funds, I mean, you could bring them back. That's incredible.
Can I tell you this? One thing I was negative on Hillary Clinton, and Hillary Clinton, when she ran for president, she was talking about all these programs and like Upward Bound out of Fresno State. That started with us, with Dottie Smith and there's other folks. That got funded, and the rest of that. And she was talking about, and we'll do this and do that. I said, we did that before. Your husband is the president, and you're talking about all of this stuff. You ain't coming up with anything, excuse my French, folks, I know better than ain't. That stuff is on the board, and you're talking about this is going to be new. No, Hillary, what you need to be talking about is appropriating money for the already authorized program.
Yes.
It's already there.
So there's a little homework for all of us to do. Go look up the Economic Opportunity Act of 1964 and the New Federalism, and you'll talk about this still on the books.
Yeah.
It's like the Hoover Commission. When they talk about reorganizing and looking at the whole deal and all of that, and that's what the deal is. You got to have the political guts to, put it in the budget, authorize it. Don't tell me that it's new stuff. It ain't new.
It's already there.
That's what it's there. You just got to have the behavior, political behavior, to make it happen. Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
Back in the 60s in West Fresno, was the dollar being circulated more within the African American community?
Yeah, because we had small businesses. Yeah.
So you guys weren't traveling outside of West Fresno to go do your shopping and stuff like that.
That's right.
You stayed.
Yeah, for example, barbershops, beauty shops, they were small businesses and sometimes kind of chuckled about. But there was Mr. Scott's Cleaners.
Yeah.
It is not that now. It's a thrift store, I think now. We had little restaurants, Juicy Pig, and then barbecue places where people went and ate.
Yeah, the Juicy Pig.
Son's Barbecue.
Son's Barbecue.
You know, and I forget her name. I forget her name. She had she could cook some soul food.
Ooh.
And she had her business there, but it got cleared out. Redevelopment to put, this, some more housing and some other stuff in there.
And the banking was in Chinatown. I think we used to go to a bank. Was either Wells Fargo in Chinatown, and across from there was the one of the best fresh fruit, vegetables, grocery stores we went to. So all that was
kind of taken out, rezoning.
Well, yeah, it's way rezoned. It was right next to the fire station.
Mm-hmm.
So,
okay, yeah, I remember that.
All that is uprooted.
So a lot of the people in West Fresno, they utilize the family-owned businesses.
That's right.
And they utilize Chinatown. Will
Yeah.
probably be the furthest. So did they ever cross underneath the bridge to go downtown?
Oh, we went to
we went to
downtown.
Fulton Mall. That was
Okay.
that was
That was
called
downtown.
Big Town. Big
Yeah,
Town.
that was downtown.
That was downtown when the mall was there.
Oh, okay.
And then what happened when they did Fashion Fair? Folks moved out of downtown and went out to Fashion Fair.
Got you.
My good friend Richard Hodge, they moved their store out there. Montgomery Ward's was down there. They moved out, and the thing. See, it's difficult. You can't blame anybody, but it's interesting that when you got a pretty good transportation system of the buses, you can get a bus now out of West Fresno and go all the way up to
Cedar and Champlain.
Yeah, Cedar and
Park.
Champlain. That's why I'm up to River Park on that bus.
Right.
Take it, get on Blackstone, and go all the way out there, right?
Yes.
And then you get little businesses like boutique type things like Bobby Smallwood. Bobby Smallwood, who graduated to me, he had a little deal there by the firehouse.
Yeah.
Called Jazzy Jeans.
Oh yeah.
But you buy his Jazzy Jeans at one price, and you go out to Target store and get it much cheaper. And so all you got to do is get on the bus.
Yeah.
So a good transportation out of that area takes you to someplace else.
Correct.
And the businesses there lose out.
Yeah. And I talked to Smallwood Jazzy, man. I remember before his shop closed.
I will say this. I'm going to say this. But I'm not a follower of his. He was a classmate of mine, but he's an interesting guy. Go ahead.
Yeah. So
Continue.
He told me that he's had a black-owned business in West Fresno for 50-plus years, is what he told me.
Out of high school. He was doing Jazzy Jeans
Yeah.
stuff.
He said he was a DJ, and then he was a store something, but he said, Flemming, I've had businesses in West Fresno for 50 years.
Yeah.
I said, wow.
Yeah.
And he told the story that you told, like he can't, no one's coming in to buy stuff anymore. They're all going out. So he shared a similar story.
You know the 41 freeway?
Yes.
The theoretical or the conceptual deal was with the freeway, folks would come back down to the world famous mall. But what happened, it reversed. The West Fresno downtown folks in Southeast Fresno go up north.
Yeah.
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 Yeah,
That's
and they're continued to build up north too. I moved in, I lived in the Bullard community pretty much ever since I lived in Fresno, and I moved down to the lofts downtown.
Oh yeah, downtown.
So I lived in the lofts for about 3.5, 4 years, and expecting something great to happen downtown. And I kept finding myself going to Northwest Fresno for everything that I needed.
That's what I mean. Okay. Oh, you were one of those. So
Yeah,
that's what I mean. Yeah. Nothing was down there.
Yeah, so I'm downtown, and I knew my cleaner guy because I've been going to him for the longest time.
Yeah.
I had a relationship. I'm trying to find cleaners downtown, and I'm driving through Southwest Fresno. I'm like, okay, where's the cleaners? Not saying that there weren't any, but I was comfortable with the cleaners that I had. When I wanted teppanyaki, I liked Sakanaya. So I couldn't find a teppanyaki downtown that was, to me, as good as Saka. So I lived down there, and I kept saying, okay, I'm gonna extend my my rental agreement. I'm gonna extend my rental agreement, still having my home. And I said to myself, I can't do it anymore, man. There's nothing down here.
Yeah.
It's like they put this nice loft in a not so good community. So when I travel outside of the gates of my loft, I'm in a not so good community.
Yeah.
And people are jumping the fences and doing all type of stuff. So I waited and waited, but I ended up going back to Northwest Fresno, to what I was comfortable to. And I believe if they keep building out in Northwest Fresno, and they keep trying to expand out in Northwest Fresno, how are they going to drive people downtown?
It's kind of a lost situation. I think probably what you do is you wind up, if you did anything economically, it'll go back to the mom and pop. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Mom and pop kind of situation. And it actually happened after I left as a city manager. I got promoted, from model cities up to assistant city manager and the city manager on 3 occasions, the interim deal. And I said, I don't want to do the city manager stuff because I was going to school. But that shopping center there on Fresno Street, the right across the freeway there, on B Street.
Yes.
Oh, like
Yeah, the shopping center.
Yeah, the shopping center.
Yeah. So now that came about not too long ago, and it'll be something small, kind of like that. But I don't think it'll be mom and pop kind of stuff, and maybe one more center like that. Maybe one more center like that.
Yeah.
So we have a task in front of us as far as the person who represents that side, Southwest Fresno, of developing Southwest Fresno. I mean, there's a lot of fields, like, you said when you took a tour, there's a lot of fields. That's been going on for a while. And like you stated, I heard you mention earlier, we did see progress, and then it took a turn.
Yeah,
right?
they just stopped funding,
They stopped funding
activity over there, the federal government, yeah.
And earlier you was talking about sports. What happened, or can I get your take on baseball in Southwest Fresno? At one time, baseball was really popular. Nielsen Park, Fink White Park, we had all these parks playing.
Sure did. Little League
baseball,
and Little
right?
League in Babe Ruth, yeah.
And it's gone. I mean, it just seemed like it just washed away. What's your take on why did it go away just like that? I mean, I'm not getting it.
Yeah, and I was a baseball player, and
That's why I asked you.
I played baseball.
Hey, we heard you were pretty good.
Yeah. No,
I heard somewhere in there.
Way back when. Folks probably want to put this in perspective. Folks, 1956, I graduated. They said, woo, my goodness. But anyway, seemed like only yesterday, but basketball, travel league basketball, has a little more glamour to it than summer baseball.
Okay.
And baseball never was a real popular because the basketball and the track guys, had the medals and all that. They had all the girls.
Shining.
That kind of deal.
Right.
So I remember, and it's a matter of, like, they got the travel leagues and all of that, basketball clinics, indoor kind of a deal, and that kind of lost it. And then you talk about, the big time stuff on television and all that, and so folks go into basketball.
Right.
basketball and the football is still really good over there.
Oh yeah,
Because
no
those
doubt.
kids just won that national championship, their little peewees.
Oh yeah.
But baseball, kids, I believe, are going in the gymnasium a little bit more. However, on a nationwide basis, it's been kind of down. You know, recognize, however, the composition of the baseball team is made up of, I would say, over half of them that are quote unquote bust in from up north.
Yeah.
I don't like to get in, white and the black and
Yeah,
all that.
yeah.
But I saw
You can
a
read
couple of their
between
games. There were three. The three outfielders were black, and the rest of them were Hispanic, and 2 or 3 white kids.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So, but I think it related to basketball being a favorite inside. You know about Frank H. Ball.
Oh, no doubt.
I know you do. As a West Fresno, this guy's been here for 20 years.
Yeah.
I mean,
You want to see everybody's picture? Go to Frank H. Ball.
He's
Yeah, he's still a
new.
rookie. Yeah.
But Frank H. Ball, the Pondexters and all the
yeah.
rest of those guys, and Boyd and all those guys used to play over there. Bowen, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Bruce, yeah.
Bruce Bowen and those guys play over there. And so that's an indoor summer kind of a deal. And you can get your game going with 3 people. They used to play the 3-on-3, one court. I mean, one end of the deal, one basket. And the outside is 9, baseball and all that.
Yeah.
So that indoor is a bit more popular.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
The glamour out, being on television, AAU,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, a
Basketball,
lot more
travel
than.
league.
That's right. Yeah.
But when I think of long term, baseball is probably the best as far as contracts, guaranteed money, and longevity of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt.
But in terms of youngsters that want to go to the big time,
Yeah.
it's a question of, don't let me be too academic, deferred gratification.
Yep.
I don't want to put off. Don't start telling me about, all of this other stuff. Man, if I can get me,
I want it now.
Right now.
Yeah, now, quick,
Tangible.
million. If I can shoot that ball and get me $1 million, make me $1 million,
Tangible. quick.
tangible right now, then they'll do it. So
Yep.
that's
Yeah.
been kind of the.
Because my buddy was telling me, he goes, man, my son's good at 3 sports, but I'm really going to push him towards baseball for the longevity.
Oh yeah.
And he says, because football, a lot of contact, a lot of injuries, concussions.
Yeah.
Basketball, a lot of injuries. He said, baseball, man,
Yeah.
guaranteed money.
Yeah.
He
And
said,
you can stand around out there and watch the grass
Yeah.
grow slow.
Spill seeds all day.
Yeah.
So he says he really wants to be a football player, but he's getting just as many looks in baseball. So he says, now I got to educate him and do a mindset change on longevity.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And so that's what he's working with his kid with. So
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
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 So, Flem, do you have anything else for us?
Well, I mean, no, I learned about the juicy pig was a good food.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
7 days a week. 7 days a week. Yeah, absolutely great.
Can you imagine?
Now, if you had to do a taste comparison, not to put you on the spot, Suns or Juicy Pig?
Juicy pig.
Ooh, Juicy Pig was juicy.
Never tasted it, but I heard about it.
And over by the deal, not too far from Sugar Hill.
Sugar Hill.
Yeah.
You guys got
night.
me.
Saturday, don't worry about it.
Oh, okay.
We'll take
Yeah.
another
We'll
program.
take it,
talking
yeah.
about
But thank you for all coming on the show and enlightening us on what's going on, how it went right back in the '60s, and where we at now.
And you get a chance to look at the past, and you can at least have an idea of what might happen in the present.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And you got to work at the present, or else it'll slip by. It'll be like us looking forward to Christmas, and after Christmas Day is gone, and it's just kind of went by, and you say, "Oh, gee, what happened?"
Yeah.
So you really have to stay at this.
Yes.
Black Lives Matter and all the
Yeah.
rest of it, in order to really make something happen.
Yes.
And to make the aim correct in terms of giving you right behavior, act positive toward me. Don't mess with me, and I'm okay. Because I can't make you love me.
Yeah.
Right. Can't make you love me.
Yeah, and to piggyback on what you're saying, with the some people use study and use predictability to see how people act, and so if you're studying and using predictability, and you know that you can get a rise out of African American community through emotions, how do you keep that same fire going after the fact? After the emotions kind of die and after the scene has died down? Do black people jump and move on to a new subject, or do they stay and fight out what they started once the emotions die down?
I think you got to keep it a we, us. Don't and the person that kind of moves forward and makes some progress. Don't forget where you came from. You know, because it's too easy. Once you kind of move out of it, and I got me a job, I don't worry about the rest of it. And I think I think for us,
That's that I got mine. That's that type of attitude.
Yeah,
and it's still, I think it's still a bootstrap situation.
Right.
Yeah.
A bootstrap situation where you gotta keep one foot, you know, in the community you came from. If that
absolutely.
if that community is, you know, ghetto or whatever,
Doesn't matter.
and help, at least help out. I'm not saying, you know,
Overexert
don't assimilate
yourself.
yourself. You know, assimilate yourself, but don't forget the folks
Correct.
back there. And a lot of times, folks get amnesia on where
yeah.
they came,
Oh, yeah.
That's
you know, where they came from.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
That's
and
it.
deny what they did
Uh-huh.
when they were a kid. You know, like I'm not proud of picking that cotton. I'm not proud of picking those grapes, but that's what
That's
I
what
did
we
in
did.
high
It's a
school
part
because
of
there
it.
was no, you know, youth employment stuff and all of that. You
Right.
know.
Yeah, and I always tell kids, don't be afraid who you are, especially when you're black. You know,
Yeah.
you should take that in. There are some things that we went through, but
Oh, yeah.
hey, believe
Yeah.
me, it was well worth it, right? And don't, like
Yeah.
you said, don't forget where you came from.
Yeah.
No.
So, and don't be afraid of who you are,
Yeah.
because we see that now. You know, they're
Yeah.
afraid of, you know, or embarrassed.
Yeah.
Of who they are. Not afraid, but embarrassed. And don't be embarrassed of who you are.
You know, when I was in corporate America, I made it further by being who I was versus who they projected me to be, because they respected me for who I was more than what they projected me to be. And when I say that, I say this because if I went in trying to act like an Anglo or Caucasian, then it was easier for them to project what I was going to do because I wanted to be like them. But when I went in to be myself, they tested me in many arenas to see if I could make it because I wasn't trained up through the big colleges or anything. When I worked in my first job in corporate America, I didn't even have my college degree yet. It was just because of how much money I was bringing the company and how I moved the needle that they promoted me because they trained me in their company anyway.
Okay.
So it didn't really matter what degree I had. They were training me for their company. And if I'm making money, I'm making the needle move. They're like, we're rolling with Flemming because he's making us money and the needle's moving.
Right.
So forget everything else. We'll just keep training them. So they sending me all over for all this training. I'm still trying to work on my college degree, but I didn't have my degree. But I was making money, and the needles were moving, and people were bought into what I was doing. So they took a chance, and other people didn't like it. So when I would get off that elevator on the 6th floor, boy, it was tough dealing with people hating me because I didn't have my degree, but I was moving the needle.
Yeah.
And that, so it was tough, and I wasn't trained for that. So I remember I used to call my wife almost every day and say, I'm quitting. I'm going to quit today.
Yeah.
I can't deal. But I wasn't trained, right? I didn't have a mentor at the time, and I was young. But I had tenacity. I worked really hard, and I was making this company money. So they were willing to invest in me, and they were willing to train me to continue to do what I was doing. So, yeah, man, it's tough now trying to work with people and to get people to see certain things. They're looking for titles and accolades. And if you don't produce or possess certain titles and accolades, or they're not familiar with what you did, you got a shot in hell to be an angel.
Yeah, and you need to understand, and people need to understand that. We need to especially African American, we need to understand how the game goes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else you want to leave? You know we're gonna call you back on the show, right?
Well, I've appreciated this because this has really been, interesting and good and all that. Hopefully, it's been kind of revealing to some folks kind of on how it works. Being the insider that I was for that 25 years out down in City Hall, but be glad to come back.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And these are conversations we trying to capture, right? And Flemming tapped me on my shoulder again and said, hey, let's start this again. And I thank you for doing that. And yourself, we're going to have you back on the show. We're going to keep the show rolling. These conversations need to be had, not only on a podcast, but at your homes.
Yeah.
And these are educated, common conversations, right? So, and I tell my young people, have those conversations, nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid of wanting to know, right?
History is empowering.
Mm-hmm.
Even with the kids I deal with and the diverse kids, but for African American kids, I think it's really empowering when you can see people that look like you that have accomplished so much, especially when they're not even teaching you that in school.
Yeah.
So you're not getting it in school, and then if you're not getting it at home, how are you getting the history of what's done even in your own town? You'd be surprised at what people have done in this town. When I hear about people that came out of Fresno, like yourself, Joe Lee, Jim Parks, people from Southwest Fresno that went to Harvard, Ivy League schools, and play, and just all the things that people from Southwest Fresno has done. For me, who's not from Fresno but been here long enough, learning that history and those stories makes me go, wow. So imagine the younger folks that don't know the history. They're in Southwest Fresno and don't know the history and things that they can be proud of and the shoulders that they can possibly stand upon. For me, that's huge. That's why I reached out to Streets and you and Jolie and all the other people I would like for you guys to bring on to the show to share that history so kids can hear this and be proud of what happened. There's a lot of people that's proud.
What can happen.
They're proud of West Fresno, but there's other things to be proud of West Fresno for.
No doubt. As a youngster coming up, the Ivy at Edison. That was the most beautiful campus I've ever seen in my life. And I was a little dude, right? And watching high school basketball, going into a institution like this, because that's what it looked like. It looked like, it was like a college. They took that all away. However, like my dad said, it starts in your neighborhoods, right? Those were, I would say, the people that I looked up to. Okay. And they inspire you to move forward. Like you just stated, some went to Harvard. Hey, I was a fan of this person. Hey, you know what? I'm a shoot to do the same thing. Right. So you're absolutely right, Flemming. It's a worth of knowledge and information and history in West Fresno. So,
a lot of it.
So don't get it twisted. But I thank you for coming on the show.
Appreciate it, and actually be glad to
you
come back. I'm almost inviting myself back.
No, you're invited.
You coming.
Hey, the library's open.
There it is. And that's that segment.
The library is open.
I would like to, we didn't get to do this last week, but I want to thank Mad Talk TV for having us do our segment, and my boy KP on the set for doing all the sound and film for us.
Good.
Right.
It's great.
So thank you, Mad Talk TV. This is Word on the Streets, and we'll be back next week.